Welcome to Club E. Hi, I'm Rick Brimacombe of Brimacombe and Associates. I'm your architect of business growth and will work with you to unlock your potential and amplify the scale of your company. Today, we are talking about the Stockdale paradox, overcoming adversity in your business. I want to thank our sponsors, Irish Titan, an e-commerce and web development firm, Highland Bank, a locally owned community bank, Romaine Berg, a digital marketing agency, Schwegman, Lumber, Woosner, an intellectual property law firm, and Voyager U, a gateway and catalyst for building your independent work life. All right, before we get going, please hit the subscribe and like button. I appreciate that. And then also a reminder that you can catch Clubby on your favorite podcast platform. With that, I'd like to introduce today's returning guest. Welcome, Jeff Redmon. Jeff is a business advisor, attorney, and founder of BIG, the Breakthrough Impact Group. And if you want to learn more about that, the website is www.big.com. And his contact information is in the comments field. But if you're not watching us and you're listening to us instead, hit info@big.com to get a hold of Jeff Redmon. All right. With that, I just want to tell everybody that Jeff has been with us twice before. He's been with us talking about his book, Cash, How 1 + 1 + 1 = 19, as well as talking about Min Big. And while not a topic for today, the first 10 people that share their name, their email address, will receive a copy of Jeff's book on cash. Again, How 1 + 1 + 1 = 19. And with a title like that, you want to get a copy of it to learn what's in there. All right, Jeff, tell us a little bit about yourself, a little background. I know you've been a speaker before, but you got a lot of interesting things going on right now, as well as having done a bunch in your past. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, I've been called many things through my career. I think the most rewarding one happened 4 years ago when I became Papa. And we have 5 grandchildren, so that's the one that I like best. With my 2 grandsons in Montana, I'm Grandpa, but my local ones, I'm Papa. I was trained to be a lawyer. Worked for several firms, big fancy law firm in Minneapolis, started my own firm now 20 years ago this year. But I've always had a passion for entrepreneurs and helping them achieve whatever they hope to achieve. For some, it's a lifestyle business. For others, it's millions, whatever their plans are. And so 15 years ago, I started CEO roundtables that contribute to that. About 12 years ago, I started business coaching, got a number of certifications in that regard. And then last year, in the middle of COVID, when all of the best businesses are always started in downturns in the economy. So I decided to start a business with Rick's help. Breakthrough Impact Group, where we joined CEO roundtables with coaching, and we're having fun and helping businesses grow, which is really why I get up in the morning. It's fun.
Yep, and again, the website for that business, www.minnbig.com. And then Jeff didn't say that he also works with me on a number of my projects and has given me good information and advice and counsel. And what I always appreciate, Jeff, is that I think as much as you like the legal profession, you're a business guy first. And so usually our conversations start with the business angle and then proceed to the legal side after that.
Fair enough. I have been described as a lawyer who happened to be a business guy and a business guy that happened to be a lawyer. So I'll take it either way.
Okay, so again, reminder to everybody to get a copy of Jeff's book, Turning 1 + 1 + 1 into 19. Put your name and email address in the comments field. And while interesting, not going to be what we're going to tackle today. Let's start right out of the blocks with the Stockdale paradox. For those of our listening and viewing audience that don't know, Why don't you give people background into the Stockdale paradox?
Admiral James Stockdale was the most senior officer who was held in captivity during the Vietnam War in the horrific Hanoi Hilton. He was a prisoner of war for nearly 8 years, and later was a recipient of the Medal of Honor, a true American hero. Enduring years of torture, 4 years of solitary confinement, he refused early release that he viewed the Vietnamese would somehow use for favor in the US or wherever. Business thought leader Jim Collins happened to interview him a number of years ago and asked him, how did you sustain yourself through this captivity? And he said there was really two things. One, you had to accept the brutal facts that he was in captivity, nothing he could do about it. That was one. Number two, he was going to do whatever it took to get through and not just survive, but thrive and come out benefiting from this experience. So Jim Collins noticed in his book, and there's a page in his book about the Stockdale paradox, and that in the good to great companies. So you had these good companies that were performing above the S&P 500, and all of a sudden exponentially moved to great. And one common denominator of all of those companies was they each faced adversity, and they had to accept the brutal facts, whatever they were, and they had an unwavering commitment that they would do whatever it took. So Jim Collins, in his book, labels the Stockdale paradox, which is now in the business nomenclature, and how to deal with adversity.
So I read a lot. With that said, I'm not sure that I even read, say, 5% as much as you do. And I know while I'm a lifelong learner and very curious, I know that you probably are even more curious. So if you combine those two things, how does that lead to the focus on one of the pages of Jim Collins's many books? And what's your takeaway from that?
Well, this winter, I had an occasion to heavily rely on the Stockdale paradox. It was January 13. I'm getting ready for my Breakthrough Impact Group meeting, and I just am feeling lousy. Tell my wife that, I think I can make it through. She heads off to take care of her grandchildren. And about 15 minutes later, I say, I don't think I could do it. I think you need to take me to the urgent care. So off I go to New Richmond Westfield Hospital Urgent Care. My symptoms were very much like COVID, so they treated me like a COVID patient. I'm in this little, exam room, and the phone rings. And like, well, I'm not answering that phone. It's not my phone. And then the doctor sticks in his head and says, Jeff, pick up the phone. COVID protocols. I'm going to talk to you over the phone. So I pick up the phone, and within probably an hour, they transferred me to the emergency room. And within a couple of hours after that, they admitted me to the hospital. What we learned later was that I had a blood infection that apparently had been raging in my body for months. And finally, my body was starting to shut down. It took them a few days to figure it out. And unfortunately, blood infections tend to attack foreign objects. And in 2016, I had an artificial heart valve installed, and this infection attacked my heart valve. Um, they discovered that they identified it on Friday, the 16th. The 18th, they transferred me to Regents Hospital. And the 22nd, I have open heart surgery. They replaced my heart valve. But I'm still sick. As they fix one thing, something else goes wrong. My one and only kidney, I only have one kidney, failed, and they didn't know if it was going to come back. So early on in that experience, I just accepted the fact that I was one sick kid. Nothing I could do about it. I had to rely on the doctors. There wasn't ever any discussion that, if we can fix this, we can send you home. In Admiral Stockdale's experience, the optimists were the ones that died. Oh, if we can just, Christmas, we'll be out of here, Easter, and they all died of a broken heart. I had no hope. I knew that I'd get out, but I didn't know when, no timeline. So I adopted the Stockdale paradox, and I'm sick, I'm here, I'm going to do whatever it takes to get out of here. And it didn't even occur to me that I wouldn't come out perfect. I didn't think about dying. I didn't think about being disabled. I certainly didn't think about somehow getting out of here and not having a kidney function. I just did whatever it took. And much like POW, I'm experiencing painful, torturous procedures on me. I'm in isolation, COVID protocols, no visitors to the hospital, so I'm all by myself. And, I just hunkered down. So I relied, and I literally hundreds of times a day, I reminded myself to do whatever it took. The nurses or doctors would say, well, this is going to hurt. Like, whatever it takes, just do it. And so it was a life-altering experience, but it was really the Stockdale paradox that kept me sane, and it really allowed me to deal with what was a pretty horrific experience. I was one sick boy with not a lot of hope that I was going to get better anytime soon. So it was whatever it takes was my mantra. Over the weekend, talking about reading, over the weekend I read, I actually listen, I don't read anymore, but Sea Stories is a book by another Admiral, William McCraven, and he's talking about he had a parachute accident, long, painful recovery, and one of his SEAL instructors said, remember you're a Navy SEAL, never ring the bell. Well, I didn't use never ring the bell, but it was whatever it took. Well, when I was listening to that, I just burst in tears. It hit me where I was not too long ago that I just didn't have much control, but you're going to do whatever it takes. So that's how it came to life for this young lad here, whatever it takes.
Wow. Almost hard to even kind of take that with another question. I can empathize, and obviously a very challenging situation and life altering, which I guess is good because now you're on the other side of it, so you can look at things maybe slightly different. Although having had heart surgery before, you probably have maybe had close to that experience before. There's I'm drawing a blank on the book, but talking about you have two lives. The first life is where you learn things, and then the second life is how you react and live after having learned those things. So anyway, certainly glad to have you on the other side of that here with us today. So you brought up COVID. You brought up, your own health challenges. You brought up not having any control over the situation. You brought up isolation, pain, not not knowing what was going wrong at first. A lot of different things. So, how do you see the Stockdale paradox applying to your average business owner?
Well, Rick, all of us have adversities in our lives, whether it's business or personal, things that we can't control. And that's where Jim Collins coaches us that to look to the Stockdale paradox to deal with those things. You know, COVID hits last year. The governor closes down my business for 2 or 3 months. That happened to many people. You can stop and complain about it. You can ask, why me? Or you can accept the brutal facts and move ahead. And a lot of businesses took that opportunity to pivot. It was switching to takeout. All of the pivots were pretty amazing. I had a number of clients that took the COVID shutdown as the opportunity to completely restructure their businesses. I participated in a 36-hour training program during the COVID experience, and this company 2 weeks before had done everything live. All their training was live, and in 2 weeks they pivoted to a completely virtual training company. And some people say, well, virtual isn't near as well, but for that company, it gave them exponentially more potential customers because they're not limited to the geographic area or people flying in. So that's why I say, accept the brutal facts and do whatever it takes to get through it.
So you're seeing businesses, business owners, the circumstances revolving around them from a very practical and pragmatic perspective, using the Stockdale paradox. How can the business owner take that then and use it with their team?
Well, what I ask business owners to do is meet with their team and literally write down what they see as the brutal facts. I'm a hardware store and Walmart's moving in across the street. Whatever it is, write down what they see as brutal facts. Now, some of them may be solvable, but some of them are just the way they are and you can't control them. So accept the brutal facts. Let's agree what they are. Those are the things we have to deal with. We can't change it. No sense bitching about it, whining about it every meeting that, if that Walmart wasn't going to come in across the street. It's coming in across the street. How are we going to deal with it? So that's step one. Really brainstorm what the brutal facts in your business are. Second, what are we going to do to overcome it? Brainstorm. No judgment, no bad ideas. Let's just talk about what might be possible. This training company, they would have, 2 days before COVID, they would have said, absolutely not. We cannot do training unless it's live in person. But brutal facts, what might we try? And sure enough, they completely transformed their business. So write down potential things that you might do to overcome that adversity. And then work through them. Some of them are not going to be good ideas. Let's try something different that maybe you wouldn't have expected before. Oftentimes, it requires a pivot. One of my clients completely structured their inventory system. So they had just-in-time inventory, where before you might come in and have to wait 6 or 8 weeks. Well, they had talked about it, but never were willing to do it while the 747 is flying at 30,000 feet. They aren't going to change the engine, but all of a sudden the plane was grounded for 2 months. So let's take that opportunity to try things that maybe we weren't able to do before. But that's what, when you start brainstorming, we're going to survive. We have to survive. And as I mentioned at the beginning, some of the companies that we see as the biggest and best companies started in a period of adversity, and they accepted those brutal facts and they took them on. So that's where I think, have your team identify the brutal facts, and then let's talk about what we're going to do to overcome them, and let's start trying. Let's start trying things. And if it doesn't work, let's try something else. But as Stockdale would tell us, whatever it takes, we're going to get through it. Because the alternative is to go out of business, to fail, and all of the things that go along with that.
Yeah, I actually wrote a piece and posted on LinkedIn last either March or April, talking about starting businesses in a down economy and all the great things. And actually, turns out Shakespeare wrote a couple of his plays while locked down from the plague, and the London theater world shut down as well. So lots of good can come from these challenging times. Talk a little bit about the Stockdale paradox. And I know it doesn't translate exactly to what you're doing and what we're doing with Min Big, but maybe talk a little bit about Min Big and how maybe you bring pieces of the Stockdale paradox into the group.
Well, I think first and foremost, it's learning. So as these things come up, you try to act as curator for the members, and talk about how many books you read. Last year I read 200 books. So I blow through them fast. Mark Cuban talks about reading 3 hours a day, and all he does is try to get one concept out of each book, and that's kind of where I'm at. I'm not studying it and being an expert on everything, but I think what we try to do in Breakthrough Impact Group is curate, so when a client has a tough situation, you can bring to them something that helps them get through it. Well, let's identify what the brutal facts are here. What do we have to do to overcome it? Are you committed to overcoming it, or are you just going to give up? And I've not met too many people that are going to give up. Last night I participated in a webinar of Pat Lencioni, great thought leader. I took away nuggets from there that I hadn't heard before, or he said it and I wasn't listening. But that's what I think we're trying to do in Breakthrough Impact Group, is bring the very best tools. And business owners don't have time to read 200 books. I've talked to business owners that haven't read a book since high school, and it's like, well, they don't need to. I'm listening to that stuff. I have access to coaches all over the world that are thinking about these things. And as things come up, let's let's find that resource that will help. And that's where I think in COVID, I wasn't thinking about Stockdale paradox at the beginning. In fact, I was. I told people that COVID is not going to be over at the end of the quarter. We have to do whatever it takes. And, those optimists that thought that they were going to be over at the end of the quarter or by the 4th of July, those are the guys that died. The optimists died in the POW camp. So the brutal facts, the Stockdale paradox says, we don't know when this is going to change, if it ever is going to change, but we're going to do whatever it takes. And that's the sort of resources I think you try to bring. And the benefit of Breakthrough Impact Group or any CEO roundtable, it's not just Rick or Jeff. You have 10 other business owners that are, living life, having experiences. They bring their wealth of knowledge and experience to the table to help their peers. And so that's how I see Stockdale paradox sort of playing into what we're trying to do for business owners at Breakthrough Impact Group.
So again, kind of Stockdale paradox, the takeaway are accepting the brutal facts and not being overly optimistic, and then doing whatever it takes. I know for us at Brimacombe Capital, over the last year was so much either moving online or the emphasis being to business done online. We really zeroed in with our portfolio customers and companies on customer acquisition costs and the cost of either securing a new customer or trying to get other existing customers back. And that was something we zeroed in on over the last year, Jeff, with all the various companies that you're either serving as an advisor, a CEO coach, as a lawyer. What's one or two kind of common themes that you've seen companies focus on over the last year or so?
Well, right now, and I don't think it's just Minneapolis area, I think it's worldwide, it's people. They don't have enough people. How do we get people? And not only how do you attract high quality talent, but how do you keep them? And how do you get the most out of them? So I see my clients paying more attention to not losing their good people, and whatever it takes. And then they don't have an unlimited checkbook, but pay just doesn't even appear in the top 5 of what causes people to stay at a job. It's more about feeling appreciated, understanding what your role and responsibility is. Did they ask for my input? It's though that sort of engagement. So that's the one thing. And then, not to plug my book, but cash. It's always cash. Do we have cash to take advantage of that opportunity? Boy, how are we going to weather COVID? We have 2 months, we're not going to have income. Sure, we might have a PPP loan, but that's short term. How are we going to get that cash back? So I think people and cash seem to be the 2 issues that I see. It's not strategy. They're not thinking about strategy that I like to think about. They're thinking about, how do I get through tomorrow? And that's how am I going to get the people to do the job, and how am I going to afford to make payroll next week?
Okay. A reminder to everybody in the comments field, you can put your email address and name, and Jeff will give the top 10 people a copy of his How to Turn 1 + 1 + 1 into 19 in terms of cash. And so that is a must read for everybody out there. Yeah, I should have said that too about the cash. We had everybody doing the 13-week cash flow, and everybody was focused on pennies and nickels and dimes. Obviously, we're at a different place today, but nonetheless, having a tight handle on what's going on from cash, I totally agree with you on that. As I mentioned at the start, Jeff Redmon has been with us a couple of times. I'm sure there's many other topics that we'll get to in the future, and we'll have you back again. So thanks for joining us. As you look at your career, obviously some twists, some turns, a variety of interesting experiences. Was there something that you learned that you wish you would have learned sooner?
And it really relates to my hospital experience. Talk about the measure of your life is how many people show up at your funeral. Well, I didn't die, but I tell you, I was overwhelmed by the outpouring of thoughts and prayers, and my wife was managing all these, keeping everybody informed. And I've always been a grateful person, but I've added to my daily rituals the notion of gratitude, and not just thinking about being grateful, but actually telling somebody, I really appreciate you being at that bar today and serving me my drink. And so I wish that I would have been more grateful, because I've been so blessed by so many people in my life that helped my career, helped my family. And so I'm going to try to make up. It's like the Grinch or the Scrooge. I'm going to try to make up and try to knock those chain links off. But I think gratitude and really appreciating the people around you and what they're doing for you and others. I think I wish I would have noticed that lesson sooner.
Well, God willing, you got a lot of years ahead of you to do some of the things that you'd like to do. And I too agree with that. And so maybe a takeaway today for folks is go buy a journal and start talking about gratitude, which then helps in a lot of other ways, right? It helps with depression, and it helps with just overall mood. And so being grateful is a wonderful way to start with self care and self help. As far as our topic today, other than trying to be grateful for what has been provided to you, what's the key takeaway from our talk today that you'd like our audience to bring with them, and our topic, and why that one versus say something else?
Well, the takeaway from the Stockdale paradox is acknowledge and accept the brutal facts. And so many of us put our heads in the sand and just say it out loud what the brutal facts are and accept them. You'll feel better, and then you're not in control, so just acknowledge it. And then figure out what you're going to do to overcome it, whatever it takes. And that's what we all have adversity, big and small. And following the Stockdale paradox, this is what the Jim Collins Good to Great companies all did. They had an unwavering faith that they were going to conquer whatever it was. And I think that's the takeaway that I'd like people to understand. Accept the brutal facts, and my mantra, whatever it takes.
Okay. Jeff, I know that if somebody from our audience would reach out to them, reach out to you, you'd connect up with them. Reminder to everybody, you can find Jeff at info@minbig, that's MINN big, BIG.com, info@minbig. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to share that story. Obviously a tough life experience, but something wonderful happened from a learning perspective and making your life better post event. So thank you again very much for joining us.
You bet. Glad to do it.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.